Hey everybody, I'm Jody Vance.
And I'm George-Affleck.
And it's time for...
It's the holiday season, a doop-be-doo, a doop-be-da, UnSpun.
Is this because you're wearing red?
On.
That's it. That's it. You're holy cow. December 1st. We're allowed now.
We're allowed. I permit it. I permit it in my home. Although Amanda's like, all right, we'll get the tree this weekend. I'm like, oh no, not so soon. Not the tree.
I don't know if you can see my decoration, my decor. No, I don't think
the
you
fire
can. It's
going
behind that easel over it. I got the fire. That's it. We're good. We're done. We're good.
I know. I live with somebody who wants everything up now.
That's like Brian. He's actually given into my pressure of not having anything because I just had everything because just painted the place. I'm like, we're not sticking things to the wall.
We're not putting any pins in the hall.
No. Hey, but I mean, the weather outside is frightful, but the fire is so delightful. Did you get stuck in Snowmageddon?
No, I mean, I'm pretty good in the snow, but it was snowing. I guess it was at whatever day we left the office. Amanda left just before me, and she does not like driving in the snow. And she was like, nah, screaming the whole way home. And we only live across a bridge.
Tuesday,
right? Far for us.
No.
Yeah. And so she had all we had to do was go across Canby Bridge. It was scary though. It had suddenly it was packed up, and it was starting to pack on the streets, and it really was quick. But we knew it was coming. It was fairly specifically timed and reported that the snow would start at this point, and it would lead, and the end, and it did. The weather reports were pretty accurate, people.
I was really impressed with that. Yeah, and the people that were like, "Oh, I can't believe," it's like, really? This is not new, okay? Born and raised Vancouverite. Mm-hmm. I've said this a million times. Remember when we had Sandgate or Saltgate or whatever the hell it was?
We had Snowmageddon. We had
Snowmageddon. Yes. And when people are like, we need to blah, blah, and granted, there was a miscommunication that went down. Hey, none of that. Eddie, come.
Eddie doesn't like snow.
Sorry. See, there's Eddie.
Dogs hate salt. They don't want
They do. You got to be careful with your dog. But when I just want to say about the Alex Fraser Bridge, because there were a number of people who were very much caught for hours and hours. I talked to one person yesterday who was stuck in his car on the S curve on Highway 91 for 10 hours.
That's crazy.
So that's a problem. But to say that we need to hire a fleet of sanding and salting trucks and plows for the 3 days a year that this happened, no.
Yeah, I'm with you on this. Although I do believe that, denying or I think politicians have to be careful, although most of them being pretty silent this time. It seems to be standard in Vancouver anyways. Politicians aren't talking much. Yeah. Well, he was here. He didn't, a few years ago, I think it was maybe 10 years ago when we had that Snowmageddon and Gregor was in Mexico. Granted, he was building homes for free for young people or for impoverished people, so he can't criticize him too much. But he wasn't here and he wasn't available. They didn't have a plan. It seemed chaotic. And there was another Snowmageddon when I was there, and it was predicted, and I was mad because it was predicted that they didn't plow at the right time. So I think there is this disconnect and timing issue that you could argue, but generally my belief is, as a human in Vancouver, growing up here as well, is that nobody knows how to drive in this weather, and I don't want to get hit by them. You've seen the videos of these cars like, this is how people drive in Vancouver when it snows. I don't want to be around them. I'm not going to go on the roads. I'm not going to drive my car. I can drive. I'm good at drive. Of course, I'm good at driving in the snow. I'm not worried about it. I know how to do it. I've lived in places where you have snow.
Same.
I get it, but I don't trust anybody else. And those traffic jams we saw were a direct result of people going, and then pileups, and then you're stuck. And you're going, but I know how to drive in this. Too bad. You're stuck behind the guy who doesn't know how to drive. And that's what you have to make the assumption of. That government and all these people can put as much snow plows on the road. If nobody in Vancouver, and we'll never learn because we don't get enough snow to learn how to drive in it,
100%.
it's never going to happen. It's never going to
Agreed.
happen.
So I saw a poll on that social media platform with the bird on it that's going the way of the dodo, probably. No,
All
on
right.
Twitter.
Yeah.
Charles Gauthier, good friend of ours, retired now, was the Downtown Business Association in Vancouver. He put out a tweet basically saying, a poll, and he's like, definitive answer, mandating snow tires. I'm like, really? No, I don't think that as a
I don't want to
Vancouverite.
spend the money.
Well, and that's it. And tell that to the single mother who can barely afford the
Yeah.
car and the
No,
insurance
just don't
that,
drive.
that you now have to find a place. That's it, right?
Stay
Just
home.
don't drive. Just don't drive on that day. But
Mm-hmm.
mandating snow tires all winter long, all over BC, because they do have that on the highways, and I think that's a good idea. I
Mm-hmm.
think that, and they do significant checks on people who would drive on bald summer tires up the Sea to Sky Highway and cause all kinds of problems in
Yes.
doing so, because there's just no way around it. It doesn't really matter if you're a good driver, if your tires are bald and
Mm-hmm.
crappy and you hit black ice. I mean, black ice can hurt anybody. And we
Yeah.
did see some of that. But like you said, George, I was out, Brian and I were running around on Tuesday when it started to snow. We were timing it out because we were told that it was going to
Mm-hmm.
start to really accumulate after 2 p.m. And then we got home, I think it was just before 4, and then it really started to come down, and we were
Yeah.
home. And we're like, you know what? We're done for the day. And if we need anything, we have to walk
Isn't
from
it
here. And
nice
really,
out? Yeah.
isn't it beautiful? Isn't it beautiful? And then just on that last part of the drive, I agree with you 100%. Because the biggest concern wasn't whether or not we were white knuckling it in our SUV that does have new snow tires on it, because we're lucky to be able to afford them.
Mm-hmm.
It was the other people on the road who were
Mm-hmm.
slip sliding all over the place. And it's just like, what
And don't tell me that
are you
you
thinking?
can't, you have to go to work or you have to get out. We just went through a pandemic where we went for a brief period of time here where there was nobody anywhere. It's like
Just
gone.
hospipals, just grocery
Exactly. And
stores,
so
just doctors. Yeah.
that's the priority. So when
Yeah.
we know a snowstorm's coming, everybody who doesn't need to go out, stay home, do whatever you can, talk to your boss, say, can I work from home? Most people will now, because we all are used to it, will say, yeah, of course. And then let the government focus on making sure the buses can get through, make sure ambulances can get, fire trucks, people who work in hospitals can get to work, whatever that means, whether it means giving them shuttles if they don't want to drive themselves, whatever. Put a plan for that stuff, and you just stay home and let us make sure that we have the infrastructure in place for that 1 or 2 days, 2 times a year, if that we get in Vancouver region specifically. If you go outside of the city, if you go to Kelowna, you go to Prince George, it snows all the time in those places and they're just fine.
And if you go somewhere on a snow day like that, knowing it's coming, because it's a thing that you are just not prepared to cancel, do not complain about getting stuck. Do not complain about not being, my bus was late. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Guess what? On a snow day in Vancouver, where 10 to 15, maybe 20 centimeters of snow is expected over just a couple of hours' time, that's a dump of snow in this town. Do not expect everything to run like tickety-boo. It's just not going to happen. It's just not. And you know what? 10 years I lived in Ontario also doesn't happen in a heartbeat there. The snow removal is a problem. Where do you put it? Where do you push it to? When you're on city streets, like the tightness. I mean, Vancouver, you have to wait for somebody to come by. No, me neither, George. I'm with you 100%. And let's talk about expense. Let's talk about budget.
Nice segue.
Thank you. I'm feeling that one.
Yeah,
Vancouver.
budget. The first budget presented a very draft budget to the city of Vancouver. All the budgets are being done across the province to the new municipalities.
Right, and you keep saying, don't be in a rush.
Yes, and this council actually have positioned it so that they won't be approving it until March, which is great.
Listening to George is a good thing.
It's so. However, the budget that was presented, I would say there's no way that this budget was created by the current staff under the oversight of the current council, because there wouldn't have been time. It's only been a couple of weeks since this council got in. So
and the mayor was away.
So this budget that was presented is really a hangover of the previous government, which has had some of the people in it that are there now. So it was a 5% property tax increase. Let's not confuse things, everybody. And then plus, 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 plus. As I always point out, there's other things that we pay for. In Vancouver, we moved, I'll explain this really quickly, to a much more of a pay-as-you-go system. We try to, anything like water, sewer, all these things, anything you could do as a pay-as-you-go and usage in order to control usage and get, hey, you know what, if I use less, I'll pay less, which I like. I like that idea. However, I want to be rewarded for that as well on my taxes. I don't want to see taxes going up as well as my pay-as-you-go going up. And so what happened under Vision Vancouver when I was there, which I always fought, was sure, your property tax is only going up 2% this year, but your other things are going up by 12, 15, 18, 23, 32%. You're going, wait a minute. And so when you look at the budget and you think about the budget, whatever community you're in, you need to really consider a few things. One is, okay, there's the budget increase overall. In the case of Vancouver, it's $300 million more dollars.
Wow.
1.7 million to a 1.9 plus almost $300 million increase in total spending. So, and the property tax increase only is a chunk of that. Where does that money come from then? Parking, water, sewer, user fees, development cost levies, all these different things have the revenue that they get. They have to get more of that to pay this $300 million extra dollars. I feel like, and I thought that, and I'm disappointed in some ways that this budget was presented at all, because generally what they do is it's a worst case scenario budget and then it's going to be much better. But I don't see it, because this budget was created without two things, that were asked for, that have been asked for in the last week. One, police won 11%. That's they represent 1/3 of the budget of Vancouver. And the other is the firefighters suddenly came out and said they want to have 51 new firefighters. That's, you're looking at $150,000 per firefighter per year. So, another
a lot.
7 to 10 million. That's a 1%. For every percent tax increase in Vancouver, it's about $8 million. You got to spend about $8 million to get what's 1% taxes. So right. So that's basically another 8% right there. That if they give the firefighters what they want, and of course, a lot of this council was endorsed by the firefighters as they were by the police union. Got them over the back. We endorsed you. Give us what we want. So they've got two organizations that want more. Of course, then there's the Snowmageddon, which means engineering, saying, hey, if you want us to fix, sure, it's just going to cost you more. We can do that. It's another 10%. Yeah. They haven't asked for much. We haven't got the details. Generally, engineering, though, is they don't have any revenue. Parking is about, but parking actually doesn't directly, you can only get so much. I think it's like $60 million a year or something. So this budget is 5% property tax increase.
I want to jump in here because, as you stated, this seems like a hangover budget, and the fact that this council and this mayor are not planning to put forward a budget until the new year, as per your direction, listening to George. What would George do? I'm
going to write this one word. Here's the one word that I want. If you can't see this, what is that? It's a zero. Start at zero. Start at zero, guys.
Start at zero.
And start from there.
I want to just, one of the things that was loudest to me in the platforms that Ken Sim put forward when running for mayor, and I think it resonated with a number of voters, was that he is a chartered accountant who is prepared to look at the numbers, because he's not a politician, right? Like, line by line, George, we've been asking for this for years on this. How many episodes are we in UnSpun Podcast?
198. Right, we're almost 200.
198.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm looking forward to the line by line, and that perhaps, because I, like you, I think there are areas where we need to shore up what are the basics, the basic needs of the community and the city. And let's take care of those basics before we add any fluffy pet project planning, whatever.
And legacy, I don't care.
I don't care.
Give me the basics. And now, and this, we've talked about this. Now we know, because that's going to cost whatever, $1.2 billion or $1 billion or $1.3 billion. Right. I don't know, whatever it's going to cost. Hopefully less than what the current budget is. And then you say, okay, now we have about this much money that's being spent on a bunch of stuff that's not basics, all important stuff, I'm sure. But but let's prioritize. The people of Vancouver want this. Let's have a conversation in public about all of these things, all these grants that we give, all of these other bells and whistles that whoever gets that money, love it, sure, great. But is that really the role of the city of Vancouver? And what would happen if we remove that money from the budget? If at the end of the process, the support is saying, no, just give them the money, then so be it. At least we went through the process. If they say, you know what,
I agree with you.
Take this money away. We're going to keep this money. and it's gonna hurt this first year, but we're gonna commit next year that this is the baseline. We're not going to 6 or 8% next year or the year after, but this is our 4-year plan. If this is going to be a 7% budget increase or whatever it is, or in the case of this is like 300 million and 1.6 billion, it's really a 15% increase, budget increase. We're going to try and keep that down to whatever.
But we need sewers done. We need street garbage and recycling done. We need
sidewalks
swept and cleaned, and
Hence
we need
removed in real time.
We got to get rid of the graffiti that is ruined. Like these are all things that cost money to do, right? But it's what you said. It's the broken window. What's it called? The broken window.
Yeah, concept. It's really just like this. It's just it's this horrible thing that just starts once a neighborhood becomes degraded by just one or two houses. This is then the whole neighborhood starts to fall apart, kind of thing. So as a city,
and it's not blaming anybody, because people then will vilify you, saying that you're, you have no heart and don't care about homelessness and don't care about the opioid crisis. You do care about all of those things, but it has to start somewhere.
Well, if you were to say, exactly. And if you were to do your process that you're talking about, there's one more thing where you have this priority budget that's on the basics of what the role of a city is supposed to do. And then they say to you, but we're spending $200 million a year on the homeless in the city. What do you think about that, Vancouver? Is this something, well, if we don't, and also it provides them the ability to go, we sort of have these numbers already, but to remind the province and the federal government, do you know we're spending this much money on something that you're supposed to take care of? Well, we're gonna keep doing it because the people of the city care. But clearly you don't care, province, federal government, because we're forced to spend this money that you've pushed down to us. That's not cool, man. We shouldn't be building housing, and we shouldn't be paying for all the social services that are not the job of a city. And look at how much money that we have to budget this year for it. We can't, this is not sustainable, Premier or Prime Minister. What are you going to do about it? When you talk about writing strongly worded letters that our previous mayor loved to do, you need to have an ask at least, or say, here's my letter, and here's what we're going to do. And we're going to keep blaming you until you've solved this problem. And we're happy to work with you, but we can't afford this as a city.
Right.
It's not possible for us to do this anymore. And you can also then, if every city did this, and you could compare on the cities that are doing zero, and there are many in this region that do nothing for homeless or housing, and others that do too much. We need to know that too, because it's not fair that one.
And when you say too much, still the problem exists, and still the problem grows, even with doing as much as humanly possible. And this is not unique to here. We are seeing this all over the place, all over the world. In fact, there is a great divide.
And you know this, Jody, because you're an entrepreneurial, creative person, right? You have a goal, right? It's great to have goals, but without a plan to get to that goal, the goal is a fantasy. It's a dream. It's not a real thing. It's great to have goals, but if there's no plan to get there, like Gregor Robertson said, he's going to solve homelessness. Okay, how? Oh, well, we're just gonna throw money at it. No, that doesn't work either. There's got to be a plan if you have a goal, and that's the problem where I find with government, because their goals are too short to achieve many of the goals. Their timeline is too short to achieve the goals that they want to have. We all want to have. We want to solve homelessness. Okay, but that's a 30-year goal, everybody. I'm sorry to say, it's going to take us 30 years to solve homelessness. How are we going to do that? Well, we have to build this over the next 30 years. We can assume that there's going to be more homeless people and more of this and that, because we have this, math. And that means we have to build this many things, and we have to put this much money into social services, and this much into psychological services, and this much into drugs and alcohol production, prevention, and all of that. But we can't do that in 1 year. And even if we did it in 1 year, it won't solve the problem. It won't get to our goal. But of course, guess what happens? An election comes, a new government comes in, they go, we're changing the goal. The goalpost has changed. And so you don't get that consistency. So if you have a goal, how do you, as a government, have a goal, unlike a business? And this is where Ken Sims is going to have a little challenge with his brain, because he says, I'm a businessman, I'm going to run City Hall like a business. Well, it doesn't work that way, because unless you somehow can embed the goal into policy that is unflappable, you can't change it. It's stuck, and no future government can go in and change it without a lot of problems and a lot of lawsuits and a lot of whatever. That's the only way a government can actually achieve long-term goals if you can embed it in legislation that makes it impossible to reverse.
So let's talk about a couple of things, because you've touched on the provincial piece as well as the municipal piece. So we've got a number of subjects we want to hit on, but because we are into the housing part of this, I want to touch on David-Eby's want to direct stratas that rental restrictions will be gone. That is, a sweeping, big time step toward what he thinks will open up the rental market to affordable rentals, which that's the part that really I look at. I'm like, I don't know a lot of stratas that have affordable rentals in them, but okay. But there might be more access to rentals at all, because it is an extremely difficult time to find a place to live in, whether it's to rent or to own right now. Yeah. It's a bizarre time. But you and I were talking about this last week, because it's an ongoing piece of this puzzle that Premier David-Eby is bringing to the table here. But the fact is, you live in a strata, you are on a strata council, and your concern is what?
Well, we talked about it last week, and I could see on the surface, it seems like a logical. I've lived in both kinds of stratas, and I was on the strata council of both. And always get on your strata council if you live in a strata. It's your home. Get on that council, because you don't want the crazies to take over. But in my current building, no restrictions, wide open. Anybody can rent. Every owner has a right to do what they want, which is an argument. In places I lived before, it was not that way. There was restrictions, and you had to apply to be. There's a whole process you have to go through, saying, I'm in a crisis. Whatever. I can't afford to sell this place, or it's not going to sell. Maybe the market's down. Whatever. You got to. It's kind of embarrassing to actually have to tell the strata council.
Right. You told that story last week,
right?
Yeah.
So, here's the deal with Eby lifting this policy, saying nobody stratas can't restrict rentals. So, two things. One is that, first of all, all strata owners are the property owners. So, you are telling the owner, strata being the owners of the properties, freehold property that they own. So it's like if you have a house, it's your house, but you just happen to have 300 people who own it with you. If you said to a single family home owner and said, you have to rent your basement suite, you have to.
Like they do at Whistler. Whistler.
Yeah. You have to rent it. You have to. You can't. You must. Right? You've got to. Obviously that's extreme. You got a bedroom that's not being used in your house. You got to rent it. I mean, it's that's kind of what they're asking strata councils to. You don't have a right to decide. So that's what your home.
Can I jump in here just devil's advocate, right? Because I've never been living under a strata. I live in a non-conforming strata, so I share insurance with my neighbor. It's really quite a genius way to go about it. I don't pay fees every month.
Sure.
It is my home. No one can tell me what to do in my home, which is great. But when I'm listening to what you're saying, could a strata council not sit down together as a whole and say, in this building of 300 people, we have an agreement that everybody is allowed to rent, but we can all agree that we won't. Like, if like Linda on the show last week, Linda Steele on Steele and Vance last week, talked about her building where there's 11 units, right? So she's very small, or 12 units, I guess, and she's one of them, 11 other units. And she's like, I don't want this in my building, because that's one of the reasons why we bought in this building, is to not da-da-da-da-da. And it's like, okay, well, could they not sit as a council and say, we're not going to rent any in here, because we're going to just.
They sure can, but you'll see them in court with the province. The province will take them, if they are serious about this, they will take that strata council to court. If somebody's saying, I'm trying to rent in this building and they won't let me, what's the deal? Why can't I?
But wouldn't you have to list a rental? Like if nobody.
Then it's an empty home, but of course you get punished a different way.
Unless you live in it. Right. Exactly. So somebody's got to live in it.
Yeah. So, and most people, there's also the Airbnb issue and all those other things. So it's really about deciding.
Which isn't restricted.
With your, well, yeah, I know. We don't actually check in our building. Okay, how many? It's up to the city has put that rule in about living in your place for 6 months. That's a whole other. The empty homes tax is a whole other philosophical issue. But okay, let's set aside the whole. What I think will become a very litigious. I think that description is what is going to lead to this policy by the provincial government not working. It'll go all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will say, you don't have the right as a government to tell people, a person, how they can use their property. It's not, I believe he's a lawyer, Eby. I still think this might fail if somebody takes it all the way to the top, because it's really telling this individual owner, a strata, which is an individual owner of a freehold piece of property, what to do with their property. That's land rights. That's not, no, you can't do that to me. You can't do that to me. So, but on the other side, and also besides all that, what's going to happen, of course, is now it's opened up every single strata to be a speculative opportunity. So these strata councils that had restrictive rules also became unattractive to investors because they couldn't rent their places, right? So the property values of those actual units as owners, so if you want to own your place, was devalued by a certain percentage because you couldn't buy them and rent them. So it wasn't allowed. So now what's going to happen, because Eby is putting renters above owners, clearly, that maybe rental prices will go down or more spot. It's only about 3,000 units they figure in Vancouver that might be available to open
versus the 9,000 Airbnb units.
Yeah. So it's really not, it's a small number, but what will happen is now the prices of all those homes to purchase will skyrocket in all those stratas because
now they're a moneymaker.
Guess who can afford those places? Investors,
developers.
Now they buy them, and they buy them as loss leaders. They'll rent them maybe. They can afford them, have as a loss leader because they're buying them as a commodity, not as a place to live potentially. They look at the long term. They can afford to lose. They can pay the 7% interest or whatever. They have the cash, and so you've basically opened up all purchase property. So it's a slap in the face to any young person who's hoping to buy. Now all those entry level units that were purchasable in buildings that might have had strata, non-rentals. Those prices have probably gone up by 20% overnight.
That's crazy. Okay, so two other things I want to get to with David-Eby other than housing. One is the direction that he's given to the Crown, apparently, with regard to repeat offenders, the prolific offenders, as well as I was on radio in Toronto for the last few days, and a big story out there. What was happening here in David-Eby wanting to seize or flag or have, basically seize unexplained wealth. This is a new thing. So it's like some are really, throwing the flag on like, wait, what? Now all of a sudden I have to explain myself if I have. It's like, yeah, actually you do, because there's, students driving around in a Lamborghini with an N on the back wanting to, it's a tough one, but interesting. So David-Eby is doing a number of things that are speaking to some of the concerns that people have been loudly screaming from the rooftops for quite some time with regard to obviously the housing affordability issue, prolific offenders, as well as money laundering and what have you. So is this spin, George, or?
It's PR for sure. It's 100% spin because federally he can't really do this, but this is we talked about this in the past about being somewhat libertarian. I'm again, the libertarians become a dirty word. A lot of the people who were the January 6th stuff use the libertarian argument that they want government, the less government, the Trump, but yet they're raising, people are, but basically what's happening, and this is not just in this kind of idea where it's based on a spin. You're seeing in Alberta, the decisions by the new premier are what could be perceived as something that provides too much power to the government itself to invoke certain regulations without authority. You saw it after 9/11 in the States, a lot of changes based on fear and worry that empowering government to do more. Like, a lot of those things that happened, actually today's podcast for New York Times, if you listen to
the Daily,
this whole thing started, the whole insurrection concept started way back after 2001 because people were angry about George Bush invoking a lot of these regulations and having the ability to secretly, record people and all this, stuff. Ironically, that led to this whole movement, which ended up being, anyways, it's all weird. But
isn't it weird though that it was like the staunch right Republican
that started this paranoia.
That started the thing, and the people now are even further to the right. It's crazy.
And so Bush used that 9/11 to change things that were, and we didn't do it in Canada as much. We did a little bit of it. We saw the hearings in Ottawa this past couple of weeks. It was very Ontario centric, I think, but still,
I watched a lot of them.
The decisions that were made about the truckers and all that stuff. What is that beyond the ability? They're arguing that was too far for the government to go, but of course the government's saying, well, we had to. This balance of making these decisions that are intrusive and overstepping what the government should be doing, and they use, whether it be money laundering, whether they use getting your whatever the truckers' argument is, the fact that
vaccine requirement for travel,
whatever, and then 9/11 in the States, and these are risky decisions being made on the backs of something that people that are popular to people, that so they can use. It's risky, and it's easy not to pay attention to it and go, do that, do
headlines.
That, headline because readers. That makes me feel good. But then you realize, oh, wait a minute, that also has snowball effect with Snow Week here.
Good one. You brought it all the way around.
A whole bunch of other policies and things and decisions government and police get to make that get people really mad.
That's all the time we have for this week, George. Leave while you're mad.
I ranted a lot today.
I loved it.
Everybody.
Do not apologize when UnSpun goes by that quickly, because we have about, I don't know, 1, 2, 3. We didn't get to Surrey policing. We didn't get into Elon Musk, Kanye and Fuentes having a meal with Donald Trump, like respecting the chamber. Oh, City Hall, the decorations on the mayor's desk. It's so much to talk about. You're going to have to follow us along on our Bird platform at george_affleck, at Jody Vance, Jody with a Y, at Jody Vance on Twitter. And I'll see you on Steele and Vance tonight. We're back to doing UnSpun on Thursdays. We're just pushing it all back to Thursday.
And people can stream your show, by the way, anytime on checktv.com.
Checkmedia.ca. Thank you. Checkmedia.ca is where you find us.
I stream it. So
and it's anywhere you get your podcast as well. So when you like and subscribe the UnSpun podcast, go over to Steele and Vance and get that as well, because the show becomes a podcast. But George, unspunpodcast.com is where people find this direct to their inbox. And thank you for doing all the production work. I appreciate you.
Thanks. Bye.